So I think I'll go up to the top from the beginning of this particular block of talks, which I believe these first few will probably be for Tamara or Jake. Let's see. Are these models published anywhere? I'm not, it was probably some models towards the beginning of your talk, so sorry, I don't have more context.
I think some of the and models or the videos. Let's clarify that. I think some of those videos are definitely out there public.
Yeah, the videos are publicly available. Most of them were made by Ernie Wright. They're on Goddard Space Flight Center has a web page that holds them. We can probably get that web link up here. We also have most of what you saw here was already presented at architecture concept review workshops. And so those slide decks are also publicly available through some of the QR codes you saw in some of the earlier talks, including mine. So you can trace back and find some of that content. It was already pointed out in the chat thread as well that much of that work was based off several published papers that are also accessible online. Erwin Mazarico has several papers that highlight the lighting aspects there, but there are also a number of other folks who have published on it. We were working with Erwin as we pulled that content together. So, number of places to go. I think I always get asked about sharing those for use in other talks elsewhere. So I do try to point people to places where the information is already public. So just check online there, and I think we'll probably make these things available here as well for after this session's over.
Great, thanks, Jake and Tamara. Let's see, next question. How many backup landing sites will be needed for the prime site in a given launch window to cover things like launch delays or technical issues once in orbit?
Um, so TBD. I would say the teams are actively working. I mean, through the years, and that will continue through the next couple years as well. On what are our contingencies? What does that vehicle performance look like? That helps us then identify the need for backup sites and how far would that need to be away from the prime site. So there's a lot of nuances and additional constraints that layer on top of the slides we showed to identify what those backup sites are. But first, allowing our providers to finish their designs and understand their performance to then be able to look at how can we choose maybe some backup sites to help with very specific contingency scenarios.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too, Tamara. Jim, you always ask great questions. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate them. But that one's really hard to answer. Even between two, if we were trying to compare two sites, they might need a different number of backup sites, just because that lighting is so unique. And with us wanting to do the early landings in sunlight, we just don't know how to answer that question just yet. And it kind of depends on which sites we start to narrow down on.
Right, and related to landing sites, I'm sure you anticipated this one. When do we expect a down select of the 13 landing regions?
Yeah, we expect that question and we welcome it because we wanted to be able to come back to the community. But given all those constraints, I mean, the teams just learned a great deal over the past year and a half. And so we didn't want to down select previously from those 13 regions because we wanted to really keep that mission availability open as much as possible as we continued to learn about the vehicle capability and all those constraints layered up across the end-to-end design. So we are finishing up another analysis cycle right now that will take all summer to go through some of our internal NASA approval boards. But our goal is to try to be able to communicate more at League. So stay tuned. We apologize that we're not giving you that answer right now, but we will continue that iterative down selection process between now and flight.
Yeah, and just to point out, Mike Seraphin was on a little bit earlier, and for those of you who saw his talk, I mean, I can't reiterate enough that the number one and two most important things for us is keeping our friends, our crew members safe, and then keeping the vehicle safe. So we are definitely driven by that, and we want to make sure we get that right. I know you've heard me say this several times in the past. I mean, Tamara and I were the ones who announced this at League a couple of years ago, and I know we were hoping to have this much sooner. I always plead for patience with everybody, continue to do so, but we really do have to make sure we've done this correctly before we can get to that position. And I think I said at this workshop last year, what we don't want to do is tell you that there's a down select and then have to change that. So we're making sure we do our due diligence and we get the work done right, and we get the work done with our partners. We're all learning as we go right now. So I just want to kind of reiterate that aspect of what we're doing here.
Thanks again. I want to throw out a question for Tim real quick. I'm going to deviate from the questions in the chat real quick, just to make sure that you get some FaceTime, Tim. Is there anything that you can share about payload capacity or, allotment slots or anything for these various LTV vendor options? I know a lot of these were just graphics that we saw, but
yeah, that's a good question. I've got to commit to memory better the requirements that we put forward. They do have a requirement to be able to carry a certain amount of payload. I believe it's in the 100 kilogram level. I don't know if Jake or may know that off the top of their head. I can definitely research that and get back to you. There is a payload capacity requirement. There's a robotic arm requirement. There's also, and again, this was interesting because we did these requirements trying to keep them at a lower level, or maybe it's a higher level, in that we weren't going to drive their design. We just wanted to tell them what we needed. So things like some people ask about, traverse, how far we can traverse. It's more based on how long the battery life, is. And so we gave them requirements for the battery life for the vehicles, because that should give us, capability of how far it can go and things like that. But I can find out. It is definitely, payload is one of the key requirements. I just have to get the exact detail of how many kilograms it is.
okay, great. Thanks, Tim. Let's see. I'm going to scroll up. I think I skipped one a minute ago. This was, again, back to Tamara and Jake. For the simulations you were showing, do those take into account earthshine or illumination effects?
The ones that we've shown here do not. I know there is a good bit of work starting to go into that. So that certainly will be a factor that needs to be taken into account. So when we are talking, most of the work that you've seen us show here is driven by us thinking about power, really. So the Earthshine might help us see a little bit, but it's not going to drive major power capabilities if we have, for instance, solar panels on the vehicle. So we still don't want to spend significant times in the darkness, even if the Earthshine or other sources of light are helpful. But yeah, to directly answer the question, that's not accounted for in what we're showing right here.
And I would say a lot of the team members are super excited about looking at Earthshine and what ShadowCam is helping us see when it comes to modeling for EVA traverse planning and things like that. But for site selection, especially these early missions, we're wanting the no kidding sun for that landing, and as Jake said, the power.
Yeah, and I do see Dean's comment there about Earthshine. My opinion about Earthshine is we're going to learn what that really looks like when we get there. I don't think it's going to be enough to really impact our planning right now, but as we start learning, as we operate on the surface, we'll really be able to characterize what that Earthshine impact is, what it's really like in places that are permanently shadowed versus somewhat shadowed or often shadowed. Those are all going to be part of that learning curve that we address as we learn how to operate in the polar region.